members that are here. This is Medical Cannabis Working Group. We're going to have one bill before us today, HB 645, that we're going to discuss. Let me just remind everybody of kind of the ground rules for our committee here. We are a working group, not an actual committee, and so we, for all practical purposes, cannot mark up or do anything other than recommend moving a bill forward. And so that will be what we're going to do today. We're going to have just some brief discussion about HB 645, if there is some, and then make a recommendation or not make a recommendation, depending on the will of the committee, of whether to move the bill to Judy non-civil. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, it's in Judy non-civil. So where the bill will be vigorously debated and marked up if needed, if it's going to move. So everybody understand the ground rules? Everybody good with that? I know what we're doing. So let me just walk through HB 645 real quick. Give a brief history. As many of you know, as we had our Medical Cannabis Working Group hearing during the off season, we heard that there are now almost 3,400 Georgia citizens that are properly registered with the state to legally possess medical cannabis oil for the 14 medical conditions that are currently in Georgia law. We heard testimony as well that there is still a huge issue of many people coming to the Department of Public Health with, okay, I've gotten my card now, what do I do now? Where do I get the product? Where do I go to access medical cannabis oil that the state has said I can legally possess? And so what we've attempted to do in HB 645 is do what 30 other states have now done, which is enact some type of infrastructure for growing of marijuana for medicinal purposes only. And so there are a couple of components of HB 645 that I'll lay out before you, but I think it's important for this committee to know that all we would be doing is granting the ability to be able to grow, process, and dispense medical cannabis oil as it is defined under current Georgia law. This isn't allowing smoking of marijuana. This isn't allowing any other application. It isn't increasing the THC level. It isn't increasing a single condition. It is just allowing the access or ability to be able to obtain medical cannabis oil for those that are properly registered with the state. And the nuts and bolts of the bill are this, that the Department of Public Health would be given the right to grant 2 licenses in our state for growing, processing, and distributing medical cannabis oil. There would be a right of first refusal for those 2 licenses given to institutions of higher learning. So if UGA and ABAC so chose to be the licensees, they would have the first right of refusal on those 2 licenses. And they would be responsible for growing, processing, and then distributing the medical cannabis oil. We leave all the rules and regulations in place for the Department of Public Health to define, as it should be, so that for all practical purposes the governor's office would have significant say-so in the granting of these licenses. If no institutions of higher learning decide to exercise their right of first refusal, then it would go, the Department of Public Health would have a bidding process where it would grant 2 licenses to private industry. And that's the nuts and bolts of the bill. It's very simple. I don't think it's but 5 or 6 pages, 5 pages. And so we'll leave it open for discussion. If there's some specific issues that we think we need to, we can actually, I guess, Matt, we can make recommendations, is that right? To the judiciary non-civil, if there's anything particular that we don't like or do like, or don't like that we want to change, we can make recommendations, and we would do that in writing. Matt would help us accomplish that goal. So that's where we are on HB 645. We'll open it up, see if there's any questions of let's give you a few minutes to kind of breeze through it. Let's see. Chairman McCall.
How are we gonna pick, say for instance, back in Georgia don't want to do it. Do we move into another institution of higher, do we go to a medical college?
It would.
When we get through with all that, that's when it goes to private industry?
That is correct. If any institution of higher learning in Georgia, it's fine, does not choose to apply for the license, at that point, the Department of Public Health would come up with rules and regulations for putting it out for bid, and have the authority to grant 2 licenses.
Can I ask you one?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Who comes up with the list of the private businesses, or is that on a free market basis?
We would leave that up to the Department of Public Health of how to establish the bidding process, but I'm sure it would be they'll be in charge of the rules and regulations to establish that. And my guess it would be done through public access of people applying for the applications. It's been done this way in most of the other 30 states that have granted licenses in some form or fashion. So there's a model that I think they could follow. The one thing but I tell you what it brings up, Chairman McCall, and this may be a recommendation that we make to Judy Non-Civil, is the establishment of some type of commission that would provide some input to the Department of Public Health that could be made up of legislators, medical professionals, industry professionals as well. And that's actually kind of what's done. And we did that in some form or fashion a couple of years ago when we established a medical cannabis commission. And they could be involved in that as well, too. And so that's probably worth some debate of should we have some type of commissioner oversight helping in that process.
We just need to streamline it and hurry up and do it.
Well, and I think that's probably the consensus of most on this committee. Probably you're right. So thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee?
I do have some questions.
Okay.
Because I'm just.
Let's see. You're 22, Representative Best.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry for not reviewing this in advance.
Okay.
And from looking through the changes to the code here, it starts out in section 1 that it makes it lawful for persons to have possession of 20 ounces of low THC oil if, and we're adding section D, and part of section D talks about those who produce low THC oil. So we were talking about granting licenses to cultivate.
That's correct.
But this also talks about if that person has a business license to dispense, extract, process, or transport. So do currently any individuals in Georgia have any of that?
No.
A bit. So we're addressing all of that in
That's
this
correct.
bill, not just the granting of potential licenses to cultivate, but also dispensaries.
That's correct. That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. It would be up to the Department of Public Health that would to grant those licenses. That's correct. And the reason, Representative Beskins, is 2 licenses to grow and process,
Right.
and up to 10 licenses to dispense, with the understanding that they would need to be geographically located, and that would be the intent of having 10 dispensaries versus the just 2 licenses for growing and processing.
And currently there are no dispensaries in Georgia.
There
Is
are
that
no.
correct?
That's correct.
And what is the reason for that?
Well, it's technically a violation of Georgia law still to sell medical cannabis oil interstate.
Would it be possible to have dispensaries if we didn't have cultivation here?
It is still a violation of federal law to transport any form of marijuana across state lines.
So currently it's your understanding that the only way to legally get THC oil here to dispense is to produce it here in the state of Georgia.
That's correct. Anyone else who is going to another state and bringing it back is violating federal law currently, even those who legally have the ability to possess the product.
Okay.
And that's the problem we're trying to solve by cultivating it here and processing it here and therefore dispensing it here.
Okay, and I haven't had enough time to study this bill. Tell me what this bill provides for the dispensaries. 10 up to 10 dispensaries.
That is correct.
And what is the process for granting of the licenses for that?
It would be still up to the rules and regulations established by the Department of Public Health.
And those could go to private entities.
Those could go to private entities with a right of first refusal going to institutions of higher learning.
So the institutions of higher learning could opt into choosing to be the sole dispenser, just like some ag colleges will have an ice cream store, for example.
That's correct. They could.
So there might be no private dispensers if I take it it's public universities.
That's correct.
If they opted into performing that role with the 10 dispensaries.
That is correct. They would have the right to have multiple dispensaries, again, to
Right.
help with the geographic distribution.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
You feel that all you wanted, or
Right.
that
Yes, thank
good? Okay. Okay. If there are no further questions, let's see what the Representative Caldwell, you are 24.
Yes, sir. I was just going to say at the appropriate time, I'd be happy to make a motion.
I
to
think
recommend.
this would be the appropriate time.
Make a motion that we recommend House Bill 645 to the Judiciary Non-Civil Committee for passage.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, well, it'll move on to Judy Non-Civil. Appreciate your support on this issue, and we'll look forward to keeping you posted on the development of the bill. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.